I'm very happy to give the floor to Vincent Cochetel. And Vincent, I don't know where you're speaking from. Are you speaking from Geneva, from Tunis?
From Tunis. Good evening to everyone.
Very good, very good. So, very happy. So we are on both sides of the Mediterranean Sea. And Vincent, also, my hat down to your work, your life work on behalf of refugees, and looking forward to listen to you. Vincent, you have the floor.
Thank you, Michel, and thank you for this invitation to share with co-panelists and your invitees a few observations. I'm trying not to repeat what Caroline has said, and I'm trying to give you a different focus in my presentation on the human trafficking aspect relating to those mixed movement, which for some of them end up by sea crossing, but not all of them. Actually, the majority of the people traffic along the way do not end up crossing the Mediterranean. They get stuck on the way. And I think it's important not to forget that dimension of that protection risk that people are facing. So I'll try to link up a bit the two. We see the development of route-based smuggling and trafficking scheme. I think it's quite clear that the pandemic has been an accelerator in many ways, and that it is quite amazing to see how traffickers adapt the offer to the demand, where we see, things like I've never seen before in Sudan, where traffickers offer to unaccompanied children to recruit 8-9 clients on promising them that for them the trip will be free of charge. Others that families that are concerned about missing relative on the way, that have been putting pressure on traffickers to have better safeguards or guarantee about the movement. So payment is not all up front. Some of the payment is made upon arrival. So that scheme is known as go now, pay later. In reality, it's not always the case, because you're going to have a lot of coercion and use of violence on the way to try to secure money in the hands of the pockets of traffickers. But we see the adaptation also of that business model on other routes towards North Africa. So that's definitely a concern for us, that the response of states is very different than for combating terrorism or drug trafficking. There is not the same energy or means going into combating this transnational crime. So when looking at the sea movement, I think Caroline talked about it. I'll share that presentation. I will not go all over those movements. I think it's important that, to know that behind those numbers, you have human beings with very different situations and people moving for different reasons. But nobody leaves his home for the fun. It's because they are facing a difficult situation. It could be war, it could be human rights violation, it could be the socio-economic impact of the pandemic, could be the socio-economic impact of climate change on some communities, and on lack of governance on bad development. I think to Caroline's presentation, I will only add a few elements. I think, first of all, to keep in mind that when we look at the central Mediterranean Sea, it's important to remind the audience that 15% of the rescued were operated by NGOs, because there is that criticism going to the NGOs, that the NGOs are attracting all the people to leave Libya. No, people leave Libya because the situation is terrible in Libya, and that there is unfortunately very little alternative on safety nets for migrants and refugees in Libya. So 85% of the people are rescued by other actors than NGO actors. So that's to address this issue of pull factor. I think some of the practice that Caroline has described are very worrying as humanitarian, because they question the very fundamental elementary consideration of humanity. We have states questioning that a boat is in distress when we clearly know that the boat is unseaworthy. We have states forcing commercial boats to rescue and force them to bring back people to Libya or to Egypt or to different other locations. We have the Libyan authorities threatening operators in international waters on which they have no jurisdiction. We have the Libyan authorities invited by the Maltese authorities to proceed with rescue operation, which are actually interception operation in the Maltese SSR. And when you look at Italy, yes, we share some of the concern that Caroline has said, and we need to find a solution to the current situation, which is not sustainable. But Italy should not be left alone with solution. Italy has welcomed on its territory 88,000 people that have arrived by sea this year. It's not negligible in terms of numbers. And the current Italian authorities are still committed to rescue at sea. They have received people on a regular basis over the last couple of days. Now, when you look at the solidarity effort at the European level to find solution post-disembarkation, only 164 people have been relocated to a few other European countries since the beginning of the year. Is that the best Europe can produce in terms of solidarity? 164 persons, when we've seen such a massive solidarity for the Ukrainian refugee coming to many European countries. So I think it's important that we look into that, and that we have a robust, unpredictable rescue at sea capacity in the central Mediterranean Sea, because people will continue to leave, and commercial actors, ship owners, are not necessarily ready to play a front role there. Unfortunately, many are even switching their device, their anti-collision device, anytime there is a request for rescue, because they feel that if they rescue, they will not know where to disembark the people. So at the end, more people will die at sea because there is no rescue capacity. So first is rescue, but two has to be collaborative efforts to find solution post-disembarkation, and Italy cannot be alone in that exercise. I think I'll leave it here regarding sea movement, but let me also emphasize, and you've covered that in other seminars that you have organized, trafficking does not end with rescue at sea, unfortunately. Trafficking also continue on the European soil, as it does in North Africa and some other countries along those routes. I'll go over some other element of my presentation. It's just a map on sea arrival and disembarkation. I think it's fair to say also that the Tunisian authorities have been disembarking a lot of people, either leaving their shore, either drifting away from Libya since the beginning of the year. So it's not just Italy, it's Italy and Tunisia, doing the most in terms of rescue at sea and disembarkation since the beginning of the year. We've been looking at, with a partner, the Mixed Migration Center, we've been looking at protection incidents, mainly incidents of trafficking along the land routes leading to Libya. And the red circle shows where the trafficking incidents are taking place, where they are mostly recorded. And I think it's important to have that picture in mind, because also when we call about a response, we should be where those risks are taking place. And if we cannot be there, we need to make sure that we have national referral mechanisms that are located in the very same place where the people are facing those risks. I think some of the challenge when it gets to prevention of risk of trafficking on land relates to access to some places, and the willingness or the lack of willingness of the authorities to have any actors on any witness at some critical border crossing or some areas. I could mention a few, but we don't have time for that. But we have definitely dark spot on that map where no humanitarian actor, local or international, have any access. Two, there are safety considerations. There are some places that are clearly out of reach for us or any other partner. And of course, there are logistic and financial capacity problems. Many actors dealing with victims of trafficking may have few resources for training. There is a lot of emphasis on training. This is good, but we should not forget funding basic services. And this is badly lacking in some locations. We've conducted recently a mapping of protection services for victims of trafficking in 12 countries, leading to Libya. This report is available here. It was issued in July for the World Day Against Trafficking in Person. This report is available in French and in English, and it's quite interesting. For me, the key findings is, well, the services are not located where they should be. You know, everybody is comfortable working in capital city, less so in the key trafficking hubs along the route. So we need to go more local, and that is going to be investing more with local actors and certainly more with local authorities who end up with seeing those people and having very little capacities to make adequate referrals to those actors who may be able to provide a comprehensive response to victims of trafficking. The other thing is investing in local access to justice. The tendency that we see along the routes is to say, oh, victims are victims. They need a bit of medical and psychosocial support. Yes, it's important. But then the next step is, because people are lacking resources, is to say, well, and those people should return to their country. Well, again, the Palermo Protocol, which has been ratified by most of the countries along those routes, including Libya, foresees that there could be alternative stay and alternative protection measures offered to victims of trafficking. That applies also to European countries. That possibility exists under Article 6 and 7 of the Palermo Protocol. It is used in Italy. It is used in a few countries in Europe. It should be widely used all along the routes. And I think that's something we call for. Now, I don't have the time to play that video, but I'll share it with you. That's the video that we saw on social media, on a platform in East Africa. It's a short video of a Cameroonian national who is held by traffickers, tortured by traffickers in South Libya. He was supposed to go to Algeria. He was tricked by the trafficker. And he gives some information in that ransom video, including the name of the traffickers that tricked him in Niger. When we received that video, sorry, we don't need to. It's 2-3 minutes. I'd like to save them. When we discussed the content of that video with the Cameroonian authorities and the Niger authorities, they had not seen it. It had been seen by 2 million people on social media, and the anti-trafficking authority in Cameroon, in Niger, had not seen it. The Niger authorities moved swiftly to arrest the trafficker in Agadez and 2 of his accomplices and bring them to justice. We've done efforts with various actors in Libya to try to locate this gentleman. A year and a half ago, we still haven't found him. And he was detained in Libya. And this is the sort of videos or pictures that we receive on a regular basis. Every week we receive such videos of people trapped on the way. Again, I don't have time to go over. Sometimes we get photographic evidence. We get GPS location of where the people are, but often those people are not even at reach in terms of security. So we have to involve third parties to try to secure their release in a way that is not harmful to them. And it's very difficult in places like northwestern Sudan, South Libya, south of Egypt, north of Chad. There are a lot of dark spots, blind spots, where it's very difficult to secure the release of such victims. We've put in place with IOM a collaborative platform known as PACTAS. It's a platform of action for aggravated smuggling and trafficking, with a focus on Libya, Niger, Chad, and Sudan, to respond to critical incidents that we receive from families, from NGOs, through social media. We've been able to make, I have to go a bit quickly, but you have the material on that platform in that presentation. We have been able to respond to thousands of cases, not always successfully. Sometimes we forced or we have encouraged the Libyan authorities to take action. So we had a raid of law enforcement authorities on a place where people were detained in an underground warehouses, hundreds of people released, but then they are brought to a detention center in Libya, where they are equally at risk of re-trafficking. So always the outcome is not totally successful, but we should pursue those efforts to try to secure the release of the people wherever they are. And it should be everybody's concern, because we're talking here about life or death, and we are talking about rescue on land, which is as much important as rescue at sea. There are more missing people on land than at sea. I have finished with 6 bullet points. Recommendation of prevention. We need to step up efforts as foreseen in the Palermo Protocol, Article 9, about information to people about the risk they face on the way, but not just the risk. People are not stupid. Everybody has got his own risk mitigation strategy, and people believe they're going to be safe on the way. We need to inform people about where are the alternative services they can find in other countries. The road to Libya is dangerous. People die on the way. Any alternative is better. But at the same time, efforts should be made to develop programmatic activities that targets the need of the people, in particular the youth. Often there is nothing for the youth. There are some humanitarian activities for the young, for the elderly. The youth are told that they should fend for themselves. They are not entitled to food assistance, no secondary education, no tertiary education. So unless we have meaningful programming that address their needs, we should not be surprised that people are going to risk their life to embark on those dangerous journeys. Recommendation on the response to victims of trafficking. As I said, invest in national referral mechanism with a focus on local actors, work on alternative solutions, not just assisted returns for victims of trafficking, and recognize victims of trafficking as right holders, not just victims. They can be meaningful witness for successive prosecution if they are safe, if we provide them the safe environment to make their case. Finally, recommendation to more effective fight against trafficking. Remove the current barrier to information sharing among states. States do not share information. It's quite pitiful, the poor state of international cooperation in the manner of trafficking. A couple of good examples of embryonic small pilot project developing here and there, but it remains very, very fragile and very ad hoc. So we need to implement that Niamey Declaration a couple of years ago that called for much more interstate participation on integration of civil society actors on the response for victims of trafficking. I think we need to use effective sanction mechanism. The UN and the EU have only put on their sanction list very few traffickers. There are many known traffickers in Libya, in Sudan, in Mali, on those roads converging towards Libya, and yet they are not sanctioned. And I wonder why. Why we don't use those mechanisms? Why not more efforts are made to follow the money? Because the money is not in Libya. Those people put their money in other places, and it's known where. So we call for much more aggressive action by states to go after those traffickers. Then better debriefing of the victims of trafficking when they are safe. This is not happening in many places. Nobody cares about what they have to say. If they don't apply for asylum, their story will never be heard in many instances. And their story needs to be heard. And as I said, we need to recognize also their rights in that process. Finally, we should encourage states to publish more regular statistics on arrest, prosecution, and sentencing of traffickers. UNODC reports that the prosecution rate for human traffickers in Africa has decreased over the last 2-3 years. And, with that in mind, traffickers have bright days ahead of us because the demand is there. With crises deteriorating in West Africa and in East Africa, some of the movement will continue to converge towards North Africa, and some people will continue to risk their life at sea to try to reach safety. So whether again NGOs are there at sea or not, people will continue to move on, and we need a response all along the route, and land and at sea.
Thank you very much, Vincent, for your intervention and for your impressive maps, but also for your statement about the people trapped in the middle of Africa, in the middle of the desert.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Father Mussie. No, I think you pointed to the fact, yes, we need to offer people dignified life where they are. Nobody should be forced to move his country or his first country of asylum, and this is true that a lot is missing for the youth, for the category of people who is most likely to move, because the vast majority of people, they don't move. They stay in the country of first asylum where they arrive. Those who move are those who have the capacity to move, and someone needs to pay for that. I mean, this is also the other side of the reality. It's not free of charge, those movements. I would beg to differ on 2 points. One is the vast majority of refugees today are not in camps. This is an image for last 20-30 years. The vast majority of refugees today in the world, they are living in cities. Those who are in camps are a minority. And yes, sometimes the camp situation are not good, both in terms of protection and assistance, but there are other situations where camps offer a safe environment, and an environment where resilience can be supported. You criticize some of the process, like the Valletta process and the Rabat process. These are state processes, not just European. Rabat and Khartoum process are processes that are issued from the Valletta Plan of Action, which is, in my view, a balanced compact between African Union states and European Union states. The problem is the implementation. Too much focus has gone on border control, and not enough focus has gone on protection on legal pathways, as you mentioned. But in those dialogues, the aspect about protection, be that of migrant or refugees, are there. It's not that it is absent from the text. So those processes per se are not the wrong tool. They are not evil tool. They are dialogue tool, and that's for states and other actors to try to influence those processes. But you are right. The problem is, when we talk about legal pathways, either for refugees or for migrants also, it's the egg and chicken discussion with states. States says we will develop them only when we see a reduction in irregular movement. But then if you look at all available research, there is no correlation between more legal pathways lead to less irregular arrival. This is not true. I mean, we can't lie to people. It's not because you will have legal pathways that you will have less irregular departure. The existence of legal pathways will certainly build a more credible narrative to tell the people, don't take those risks, don't go, there are legal alternatives. It will also facilitate the dialogue with some countries of origin about return, because some countries of origin cannot care less about their citizens stranded en route. or being trafficked en route. They don't want to extend protection to their citizens. And I think there's a real responsibility there about countries of origin. It's fine to hold accountable transit countries or countries of destination. We should equally place the responsibility on countries of origin for not keeping their citizens safe, for not respecting human rights, and sometimes for not readmitting their citizens who are not authorized to reside on the territory of third country. There were a couple of questions in the chat about Morocco. Precisely, we have shared all the testimonies of the survivors of that tragedy in Melilla, or the border with Melilla, with the National Human Rights Commission of Morocco. It is also for them to activate existing legal remedies in Morocco, so a full light is being shed on what has happened at that border, at that critical border crossing. Just wanted to say that it's also as I said, people move from various reasons, and it's important to identify better who are victims of trafficking. Just for your audience to know that about 35% of the people arriving in Italy will get some form of protection in Europe. The others will live in irregular situation, will be requested to leave the country where they are, which they may do for some, but for the majority lies ahead of them a miserable life. They will not get residence permit in Europe, and I think that's another, let's say, social and human social time bomb that exists and that we are not necessarily tackling well in Europe. They are not easy solution. Big debates in countries whether you should regularize, whether regularization or partial regularization lead to pull factor. There are difficult debates and no simple response by states. But just wanted to clarify that information in terms of what's likely to arrive to people who get on those boats who go to Italy.
Thank you very much, Vincent.